Hey kiddos, we are back. And as you can see, our background has changed just a little bit. Do you know why? Because Aslan is on the move. Aslan has started coming into Narnia, and all of a sudden, the last few chapters, what started changing? Flowers started coming up, the snow had stopped, the ice started melting, and spring was coming, because with Aslan brings new life and growth. All right, and so we had just left him. He was with Peter, and Aslan had Peter kneel down, and he knighted him. He put the sword on both shoulders. He had knighted him, kind of putting him in charge. So Peter was ready to go. But let's see what happens with Edmund. When he'd been made to walk far further than he'd ever known anybody could walk, the witch at last halted in a dark valley that overshadowed with fir trees and yew trees. Think about that, kind of dark, gloomy, and you can't even see the sky. Edmund simply sank down and lay his face down, doing nothing at all, and not even caring to what was going to happen to him next, provided they would just let him lie still. Have you ever been that tired, where you're just like, I don't even care what happens, just let me sleep? I have. He was too tired even to notice how hungry and thirsty he was. The witch and the dwarf were talking close beside him in low tones. Whisper, whisper, whisper. No, said the dwarf. It is no use now, O Queen. They must have reached the stone table by now. Perhaps the wolf will smell us out and bring us news, said the witch. It cannot be good news if he does, said the dwarf. 4 thrones in Cair Paravel, said the witch. How if only 3 were filled? That would not fulfill the prophecy. What difference would it make now that he is here? She's talking about Aslan. What does it matter? If there's 4 thrones and there's only 3 kids with Aslan, doesn't matter. He may not stay long, and then we would fall upon the 3 at Cair Paravel. So she's thinking that the 3 kids might end up at the castle at Cair Paravel, but it doesn't matter because that won't fulfill the prophecy. And the prophecy was that they would rule, right? And the queen would be out. Yet it might be better, said the dwarf, to keep this one, as he kicked Edmund, for bargaining with. Yes, and have him rescued, said the witch scornfully. Then said the dwarf, we had better do what we have to do at once. So the dwarf's saying we should just keep him, right? And the witch is saying, and what if they rescue him? Then they can fulfill the prophecy. So she had a different idea. It wasn't good. I would like to have it done on the stone table itself, said the witch. That is the proper place. That is where it has always been done before. It will be a long time now before the stone table can again be put to its proper use, said the dwarf. True, said the witch, and then, well, I will begin. At that moment, with a rush and a snarl, a wolf rushed up to them. So do you remember they sent the wolf out to kind of find out where the kids were, where Aslan was, bring back the news? I have seen them. They were all at the stone table with him. They have killed my Captain Morgram. I was hidden in the thickets, and I saw it. One of the sons of Adam killed him. No, said the witch. There need be no flying. Go quickly, summon all our people to meet here, speedily as they can. Call out our giants. Call out our werewolves and the spirits of those trees who are on our side. Call the ghouls and the bogles and the ogres and the minotaurs. Call the cruels and the hags and the people of the toadstools. These don't sound like very nice people, do they? They're probably not, because they're on her side. We will fight. What? Have I not still? My wand will not... So they're saying, can we fight? But she's like, I still have my wand. As long as I have my wand, I can rule. Will not their ranks turn into stone even as they come on? Be off quickly. I have a little thing to finish here while you are away. So she is getting all the evil creatures all together. And she's like, as long as I have my wand, I could turn people to stone. We could win. The great brute, this is the wolf, bowed his head, turned and galloped away. Now, she said, we have no table here. Let me see. We had better put him against the tree trunk. So they're going back to dealing with Edmund. Edmund found himself being roughly forced to his feet. Then the dwarf set him with his back against the tree trunk and bound him fast. He saw the witch take off her outer mantle. Her arms were bare underneath, and they were terribly white. Because they were so very white, he could actually see them. But he could not see much else. It was so dark in this valley under the dark trees. "Prepare the victim," said the witch. Oof! And the dwarf undid Edmund's collar and folded back his shirt at the neck. Then he took Edmund's hair and pulled his head back so that it was to raise his chin. After that, Edmund heard a strange noise, a whiz, whiz, whiz. For a moment, he couldn't think what it was. Then he realized it was the sound of a knife being sharpened. So they've got Edmund up against the tree, his collar open and his neck pulled back, and the knife sharpening. Ooh! At that very moment, he heard loud shouts from every direction. Oh, thank goodness! And drumming of hooves and beating of wings and screams from the witch, confusion all around. And then he found he was being untied. Strong arms were around him, and he heard big, kind voices saying things like, "Let him lie down. Give him some wine to drink. Steady now. You'll be all right in a minute." Oh, yay! Then he heard the voices of people who were not talking to him, but to one another. And they were saying things like, "Who's got the witch? I thought you had her. I didn't see her after I knocked the knife out of her hand. I was after the dwarf. Do you mean she's escaped?" A chap can't mind everything at once. "What's that? Oh, sorry, it's only an old stump." But just at this point, Edmund went off in a dead faint. You think you might faint? So here he was, tied up. The witch was sharpening her knife. Her plan was to kill him. And all of a sudden, loud voices came in, and when they were settling him down, and they picked him up, and they carried him away, and they were looking for the witch, and they're like, "Where'd she go? Where'd she go?" And they said, "All it's here is a stump." And Edmund fainted. Presently, the centaur and the unicorns and the deer and the birds, they were of course the rescue party which Aslan had sent in the last chapter, all set off to go to the stone table, carrying Edmund with them. But if they could have seen what happened in that valley after they had gone, I think they may have been surprised. It was perfectly still, and presently the moon grew bright. If you had been there, you would have seen the moonlight shining on the old tree stump and on a fair-sized boulder. But if you had gone on looking, you would have gradually have begun to think there was something odd about both the stump and the boulder. And next, you would have thought that the stump did look really remarkably like a little fat man crouching down to the ground. And if you had watched long enough, you would have seen the stump walk across to the boulder and the boulder sit up and begin talking to the stump. Uh-oh. For in reality, the stump and the boulder were simply, do you know who they were? Who do you think? It was the witch and the dwarf. They had disguised themselves as a stump and a boulder. For it was part of her magic that she could make things look like what they aren't. And she had the presence of mind to do so at the very moment when the knife was knocked out of her hand. So the rescue party had come in, they knocked the knife out, and then she changed herself to look like a stump and him like a boulder. She had kept hold of her wand so that it had been safe too. She needs to keep that wand, doesn't she? When the other children woke up the next morning, they'd been sleeping on piles of cushions in a pavilion. The first thing they heard was from Mrs. Beaver, was that their brother had been rescued and brought to the camp late that night, and was at that moment with Aslan. Now, I just want to stop and think about this beautiful place, all right? The tent that the kids were in was Aslan's tent, so there was just mounds of beautiful pillows. Think of your fluffiest little tent bed with all kinds of beautiful embroidered and gorgeous fabric pillows, and they were just sleeping gently. But when they woke up, they found that Edmund had been rescued. As soon as they'd had their breakfast, they all went out, and there they saw Aslan and Edmund walking together in the dewy grass apart from the rest of the court. There is no need to tell you, and no one ever heard what Aslan was saying, but it was a conversation which Edmund never forgot. As the others drew near, Aslan turned to meet them, bringing Edmund with them. "Here is your brother," he said, "and there is no need to talk to him about what is past." Edmund shook hands with each of the others and said to each of them in turn, "I'm so sorry." And everyone said, "That's all right." And then everyone wanted very hard to say something which would make it quite clear that they were all friends again with him. Do you ever have that when you and your brothers and sisters get into something and in the end you're just like, "I'm sorry, it's all right. We're sisters and brothers. We're friends." But something, of course, there was no one could think of anything that in the world they could say. What can they say when Edmund had betrayed them, right? But they did forgive him. Before they had time to feel really awkward, one of the leopards approached. It approached Aslan and said, "Sire, there's a message from the enemy who craves an audience." "Let him approach," said Aslan. And that's where we're going to end. So think about how you treat your brothers and sisters, even in this circumstance. They loved each other and they said they were sorry, but what do you think Edmund and Aslan were talking about? That's the real question. Think about that and we'll get back tomorrow, okay? I'll see you tomorrow.